Hi, my name is Steven Blumenfeld. I'm Vice President and General Manager of Trakref here at Fexa, and excited to talk with you all today about refrigerant leaks, refrigerant management. Why does it matter? How do we do it successfully? There are a number of reasons why you want to track and manage your assets to reduce refrigerant leaks. One key reason, obviously, is regulation. These regulations began with EPA Section 608 under the Clean Air Act. They've since been expanded under the AIM Act to more asset types and more material types. And many states have their own specific regulations, whether it's in California, New York, Washington, all focused on helping operators manage and reduce refrigerant leaks by instituting a set of best practices to ensure that whenever an asset is serviced, you are tracking the key components that contribute to refrigerant leaks, and you're measuring them so that you can ultimately reduce the leaks in your system. So let's start by talking about the regulatory requirements. The EPA started regulating refrigerant leaks under the Clean Air Act and codified that in what's known as EPA Section 608. And that established a framework that has since been expanded upon by the AIM Act nationwide, and also certain state regulations under California Air Resources Board, Washington State's Department of Ecology, and New York State, all of which are focused on the same thing, reducing harmful emissions from refrigerant leaks. To comply with this growing and complex web of regulations, operators need to know which of their assets are leaking, how much are they leaking, and to have a plan on what to do when those assets do leak. Key to that is having visibility into the leak rates of your assets. Anytime refrigerant is added or removed from a system, anytime a leak inspection is performed, you're going to want a standardized way of tracking and managing that so that you know whether or not your assets hit critical leak rate thresholds. Specifically, the EPA has set 10%, 20%, and 30% as leak rate thresholds for comfort cooling, commercial refrigeration, and industrial process cooling, respectively. And if leaks exceed those thresholds, then certain leak repair actions must be taken within 30 days. Now, keep in mind, different regulations and timelines may apply in specific states, like Washington and New York, where you have even shorter timelines to fix those assets. And if you can't bring that asset back into normal operation during that period of time, then operators have to submit retrofit or retirement plans to be able to indicate how they're going to move forward without a harmful leaking asset. Beyond the initial leak repair triage, the EPA also introduced the concept of chronically leaking appliances. An appliance is considered chronically leaking if it loses 125% or more of its refrigerant charge over the course of a year. Again, this makes tracking and management of the leak rates critical, because otherwise you would have no idea when your assets are hitting those critical thresholds and if there's further action that you're going to have to take to remain in compliance. Every year on March 1st, operators have to submit records to the EPA for any applicable appliances that have hit that chronically leaking threshold of 125% or more. And while we know that the care of your assets are trusted to your valued service providers and partners, it's important to recognize that these record-keeping and reporting obligations are the responsibility of the operator, not the service provider. While the service provider needs to certainly follow proper protocols such as not venting equipment and having the proper licenses to work on certain HVAC and refrigeration equipment, it is the operator that is ultimately responsible for tracking and managing leak rates and submitting any required documents to regulators such as the EPA. And the logic here is straightforward. You might have multiple service providers servicing an asset over the course of a year based on availability, changing vendors. So ultimately, it's the responsibility of the operator to make sure that they're tracking and managing the health of these critical appliances, including the leak rates, which determine if there's any regulatory action that they need to take. Beyond regulation, leaking refrigerant has a major impact on a company's sustainability footprint. This is particularly relevant if a company reports on its emissions profile to investors, supply chain partners, or regulators, such as the case in California with SB 253, requiring companies that do $1 billion or more in revenue and have any footprint in the state of California to report on their corporate emissions on an annual basis. Refrigerant leaks are highly potent greenhouse gases. They have an impact thousands of times that of carbon dioxide. And so while it might seem small in absolute terms, the overall impact of emissions from refrigerant can be meaningful to the overall emissions profile of a company. Again, the only way to report on this accurately is to have a single source of truth. So how do you report on emissions from refrigerant leaks? Well, you need to know which appliances have leaked, what material type has been emitted into the atmosphere, what's the global warming potential of each of those different refrigerants, and how do all of those figures combined roll up into a CO2 equivalent that you can include as your Scope 1 fugitive emissions. The good news is that there are tools that can bring all of this information together and do the math for you. Leaks are ultimately what contribute to your regulatory risk as well as your sustainability impact. So having the right processes and systems in place will enable you as the operator to have more control, more visibility over all of your assets, the various service providers who keep them operational, and all of the information that you need to be successful in your regulatory and sustainability reporting whenever leaks do occur. So how does it work? Well, it starts by having an up-to-date asset inventory, knowing at the circuit level what refrigerant types your assets are using, and then making sure that there's a central repository to log all of that information whenever those assets are serviced. This gives you full visibility, not only into that asset health, but also when leaks do occur, you know the emissions impact of those leaks for your Scope 1 reporting. You know whether or not they've hit key regulatory thresholds for state and federal regulations, and you have an audit-ready paper trail that you can ultimately use to submit to various regulators in the event that you hit some of those critical thresholds. Ultimately, this is the capability that Trakref provides. On the surface, it provides a single workflow that your technicians can use whenever they're servicing your equipment, making sure that every critical field is captured and associated with the asset that's being serviced. But under the hood, a lot more is happening. We have fact tables that identify refrigerant types, global warming potentials, overall emissions impact, as well as the regulatory thresholds for leak rates to enable easy one-button reporting to keep your regulatory and sustainability reporting requirements in check. Ultimately, refrigerant management is just a specialized form of asset management for these critical HVAC and refrigeration assets, and all of that fits under the broader umbrella of good facilities management. We know these are the operations that you're already taking to maintain uptime and keep your stores running smoothly. I hope you found this helpful in connecting some of the dots on how refrigerant management ties to asset management and facilities management for your operations. For more information, visit our website at fexa.io and stay tuned for more videos. Thanks.